In our third video, we're going to continue on classical conditioning, and we need to remember that in the previous video we discussed about very important factors that influence classical conditioning, and they are contingency, contiguity, the timing between conditional stimulus and unconditional stimulus. And also we discussed the individual's learning history and the preparedness, biological or not, of the human to learn as important factors in classical conditioning. Before we continue and discuss anything else, I want you to understand that stimulus discrimination, generalization, extinction, and spontaneous recovery of stimulus applies also in other kind of learning. But we introduced here first time, that's why we need to discuss it in depth. So these four things are the principles of classical conditioning. This is what you need to remember when they ask you to identify, explain, or give example of this kind of situations. Because they can give you a question worded as this. Identify one principle of classical conditioning. Or they can be giving you freebies and they ask you what is a stimulus discrimination. Or one more, give you an example and tell you identify a situation here. And you have to say that's what's happening in stimulus discrimination. I want you to remember though these few things. Stimulus discrimination is paired or opposite of stimulus generalization, and stimulus extinction is the opposite, paired with spontaneous recovery of stimulus. Before we go further, I'm referring to this example. That's the little Albert famous example. And I want you to understand that what has happened to little Albert is called stimulus generalization. In the beginning, Albert was presented with an unconditioned stimulus, a loud noise. And the unconditioned response was fear. It's normal for a baby to be scared of loud noises. Then, every time Albert was touching his little white rat, he was listening the sound. So the unconditioned stimulus and the conditioned stimulus were paired, and the sound was there. That means slowly Albert was conditioned to fear. But then, what happened to little Albert's fear? Because biologically he was pre-wired, he was prepared for this. He couldn't separate rat and rabbit and dog and Santa. What he was remembering with his simple mind was fur. So, all other stimuli, similar to rat, the furry part, were fearing to Albert because he generalized the stimulus. So, stimulus generalization, I want you to learn this term. Stimuli are generalized when they are similar to the originally conditioned stimulus. They have to be similar. They were all fairy. Yes, the more similar a stimulus is to the classic, to the conditioned stimulus, the more likely generalization is to occur. Likely. Let's go to the next in a discussion of this experiment.
John B. Watson, known for establishing the behavior school of psychology, carried out one of the most influential psychology studies in the 1920s that would later on be something that would never be forgotten. Classical conditioning, first experimented by Ivan Pavlov, was used on a dog when an unconditional stimulus was used to produce an unconditional response, and a conditional stimulus was used to produce a conditional response. This was later on extended by Watson in his demonstration of the Little Albert experiment. In Watson's experiment, a little baby Albert was used to be conditioned. He was born to a woman as a nurse in the Harriet Lane home of Untitled Chapter. Although raised in a hospital environment, Albert developed normally at a very stable. Ivan Pavlov was able to condition the dog. Could Watson now do the same thing? Now to the actual experiment. First off, Watson presented little Albert objects that he was not afraid of, objects that Albert initially liked. These included fire, a monkey, a dog, a rabbit, finally, a white rat. Albert in particular liked the white rat. From all these clips, notice Albert's positive reaction. Now comes the condition. To start off the condition, when Albert reached to touch the rat, a loud bar was struck whenever Albert reached for the rat. Here, Albert first off fell forward. He was startled, but he did not cry yet. But he reached for it for a second time and heard it, and then he started to cry. Watson had indeed conditioned a fear response in little Albert. Albert was then shown a rabbit. He immediately cried and got as far away as possible. Then a dog was also frightened. Albert did not cry right away. He was acting cautious. It was only when the dog came right up to his head that he began to cry and tried to get away from it. After this, a sealed fur coat was brought in. Albert turned away from it and was agitated. Then Watson used the Santa Claus which provoked a more negative response by moving Albert. From the previous experience from the white rat, little Albert suddenly became afraid of familiar objects that had the same characteristics as the white rat. This phenomenon was known as generalization. Watson then wanted to test whether the reaction would carry over. He did the same. The previous tests were done in a small dark room, but now he was brought into a larger room.
Sorry.
He was presented with the same objects, but did not show strong symptoms of withdrawal until The objects were paired with a loud noise. Watson now wanted to see if fear could remain in Albert over a period of time. So Albert was brought home and returned one month. When he returned, he was tested with the same objects and paired with the same loud noises. Albert indeed showed the same strong signs of withdrawal. Watson once again proved that the condition appeared to intimidated Albert. Watson concluded that phobias were most likely condition responsive. The little Albert study is extremely important in psychology and other disciplines. It has inspired other important researchers of the past. It continues to impact the direction of psychological investigation today. Component process theory.
And also, it has influenced Watson, who became a famous millionaire and an advertising guru, using fear and conditioning people to ads. We're going to watch later a movie to understand how advertising can manipulate and condition us. But this is the beginning. So, first principle, stimulus generalization. A condition response occurs to stimuli other than the original condition stimulus based on the similarity of these stimuli to the condition stimulus. This is what I need you to remember. Occurs to stimuli other than the original based on the similarity. Keywords: stimuli other than the original, similarity. Is that an example of stimulus generalization? Have you ever felt afraid when driving the car just because you watch behind you a white Falcon or Commodore following you and it has a rack of spotlights? May not be police, maybe escort, maybe zoo keeping. Still, if you are afraid that the police is approaching you, it's because you're scared of police cars. They are white typically and they have spotlights. This is American. And you have generalized that fear to any kind of car with these spotlights on top. This is an example of stimulus generalization. Let's discuss the second principle, stimulus discrimination. The word speaks for itself. I discriminate stimuli. So, condition response does not occur to stimuli that they are different to the original condition stimulus, based on the difference. And the example for this is the phone. It's different, the mobile to the table phone, but also your phone is different to the other phones. So stimulus discrimination occurs when an organism that has learned to respond to a specific stimulus does not respond in the same way to new stimuli that are similar. So you don't respond to the other phones, they're similar. You respond only, pick up only your phone. You don't even turn. That means that you have learned to discriminate between the sound of your mobile and the ringing of the others. The third principle is called extinction. Stimulus extinction occurs when a condition stimulus is presented, and now it's presented without the unconditioned stimulus for a long time, for many times, again and again, causing the conditional response to weaken and eventually stop occurring. Remember the theory, the contingency theory, where every time it's presenting, the more it's presenting, the stronger it becomes? Extinction is the opposite of this, because it stops being paired, it weakens, and eventually stops occurring. So if I'm scared of spiders, and for long time I haven't seen a spider, or I've seen spiders and they were so tiny I wasn't scared of them, may be possible to stop being scared of spiders, stop having arachnophobia. Extinction is this example. Let's say that you are scared of your dentist, of the drill of the dentist. Extinction is the gradual weakening of the suppression of the previous conditional response. So if you have so many damaged teeth that you have to go and you have a very good dentist that puts a nice injection there and you are not in pain every time you have a drill, probably forget it. Extinct the fear of the drill and the dentist. So if you have classically conditioned fear of the dentist drill, and later start working as a dental assistant, and you sit every day, you're not scared, gradually this will diminish. Okay? You have to answer to the why. Why it's missing, what's missing that doesn't strengthen the connection condition. The fourth principle is spontaneous recovery. It's the reappearance of a previous extinguished conditional response after a period of time that has passed and follows that extinction. For example, I have stopped being scared of the dentist because I'm working as assistant, and then I sit on the chair of the dentist to fix my tooth. It's spontaneous recovery. As an assistant, I don't care. As a patient, I'm scared to death. Spontaneous recovery is the reason why some couples who have recently broken up, they meet each other again and they misinterpret the sudden flare-up and return to bad relationships. Let me give you another example. Do you remember your girlfriend telling you that her boyfriend is bad and she doesn't like him anymore and he's unreliable and they want to separate, and they do separate, and then they be back together? Why is this happening? Because these people, when they meet, spontaneously recover the flame. I really need to discuss this as part of conditioning. We're discussing this in the class, and I want you to understand that prejudice can be classically conditioned. I want you to practice and write examples of how can racism, homophobia, or prejudice can be classical conditioned. The answers have to be posted in the module. You can choose something else if you don't like, say, racism. We can talk about sexism, homophobia, or religious intolerance. This is a result of Ku Klux Klan and how successful they still are in America. Americans have an Afro-American president, but still in Mississippi, Ku Klux Klan reigns. Ku Klux Klan is at the most strength ever. Why? How these people have been conditioned to fear or prejudice. Remember, I want this example: unconditioned stimulus and response. Let's discuss some other examples of classical conditioning before we finish this video. First things first, I want you to understand that taste aversions, like not liking something for a reason, is the result of classical conditioning. Associating taste with unpleasant feelings such as nausea is the most common taste aversion. I remember myself when I was pregnant with my daughter in the first trimester. I was cooking some Greek food that has a specific smell. And I associated the smell of the growing yeast with the nausea I felt as pregnant. I can't cook these Easter breads anymore, 15 years later. Also, the smell of eggs, coffee, can trigger either hunger or nausea in pregnant women. Another example. Usually, cancer patients getting nauseous from chemotherapy. If they eat a food immediately after the treatment, they hate that food, even if it was previously their favorite. Let's say you love chocolate, you have chemo, you come out of the chemo, somebody gives you your favorite chocolate. Because you connect the chocolate with the chemotherapy's nausea, you start disliking chocolate. You feel like you will vomit every time you will eat your chocolate. Also, I want you to read or listen carefully to the next explanation, because it was a similar question often in the past exams, and we're going to see it, and it is related to these cancer patients or other kind of patients. During first several treatments, the conditioned stimulus, the nurse is there, and there is no response. But then the unconditioned stimulus happens, and this is the chemicals and the chemotherapy, and then the unconditional response is there, which is the nausea or the vomiting. After a while, the cancer sufferer sees the nurse after several chemotherapy treatments and feels nausea, because it makes the connection that the nurse is obnoxious. It was a joke. So do you understand how this connection has been done? The nurse really is not responsible with the nausea, doesn't create any nausea. But the nurse is connected to giving the pill, okay, or giving the chemicals. One comes next to another. One triggers the other. So when the unconditional response is there, the nausea, it links back to this, and with continuity and contingency to the nurse. This is why we have this example. You can have the same example with the chocolate I told you, but after. Okay? Conditioned stimulus, feel vomit, you eat chocolate, you keep feel vomiting with, and because of the chemia, therefore you condition yourself with the chocolate and the chemia. The same can be with the food poisoning. An example of a student. Anna was eating pizza. Imagine this is pizza. And she didn't have any response, any nausea, any vomit. One day, she ate Hawaiian pizza. Imagine this is Hawaiian pizza. And she became sick. And she made the connection. She generalized that. She made the connection that Hawaiian pizza makes her vomit. So now, every time she's eating the pizzas, she feels like vomiting. Okay? Now, let's pay attention to this example because I want you to remember it and have it in your mind, possibly use. You can read that. Make the short story. Say the short story. In an experiment they have finished in 1999, they realized that exposure to hospital stimuli associated to chemotherapy suppressed the immune system. And the same way, the chemotherapy reduces the immune cells. The people who were expecting to have chemotherapy, they were making themselves having less strong immune system. So they prove that with blood, and the researchers now are trying to see if they can actually do the opposite, if they can strengthen the immune system by using classical conditioning. If the theory says if they scared to death, let's say, consider that as the chemical, because they're going to have chemo. And this fear makes their immune system fall down and therefore has less immune function. They consider, can they use something positive to make them to be optimistic before the chemo and help their body to cure themselves better. This is actually based on the idea that some people who are optimistic are better, curing easier than those who are not optimistic. And this is the problem now. Is it a discussion of the biological impact of classical conditioning? Is it the power of the mind? Or it is both? And these are examples of fears which are really classical conditioning. For each one of them, in the class, we're going to have this scenario, unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, conditioned stimulus, conditioned response, and identify all this. This is the one. Other examples, emotional response. Before it was taste aversion, this time is phobias, nauseas, panic attacks, increased heartbeat, sheer fear. All this is happening with something that's called altophobia, or fear of heights. Phobias produce disproportionate anxiety. Okay, this is a fear. Somebody forgets it can be hauled from here, forgets that he is tied with ropes, scares to death. Heart rate goes up. Also, conditioned fear. People are scared of syringes. Could you please stop the video and give an example? The same. We discussed a lot of insects, spiders, snakes. Please stop the video, make an example. We discussed the drill again. I want you to write this down, and we're going to discuss in the class. After all, this Prezi includes the video I'm going to show you in the classroom. Now, examples of classical conditioning. Emotional. You smile when you listen to a song. Everybody smiles when they listen to a song. You sweat, your hands sweat when you have exams. And last but not least, is advertising an application of classical conditioning in everyday life? Think. If your answer is yes, why? If your answer is no, why? And how do you think that the ad is application of classical conditioning? I remind you that the little Albert experiments person, psychologist, Watson, became an advertising guru because he was based on classical conditioning. He was expert in everyday life and applied fear or other emotions. So the answer is yes. Advertising is the application of classical conditioning in everyday life. Why? Because it speaks to our emotions and because we make the connection. So tell me, once you see these beautiful models, boy and girl, what do you think? Do you like what you see? Okay, I presume you said yes. And why you like them? Because they are beautiful. And this is an ad. What this emotional connection is happening to your mind? This beautiful person wears these glasses. If I wear these glasses, I will look like him. This beautiful girl wears these glasses. If I wear them, I will be like her. And who is doing that? Calvin Klein. So if I buy Calvin Klein eyewear, I will look like her. So they bet on our emotions. Fear, happiness, desire, motivation, name it. This is how the classical conditioning is happening in the advertising. The product is presented at the same time with an attractive individual or a nice situation, a nice home, a nice car. And Because the attractive individual situation gives us a positive emotional response, we transfer this positive emotional response to the product. We make the connection. The product gives us the emotional response, not the attractive individual. This is the reason why girls are used to sell products like jeans. Tell me why this voluptuous girl, this curvy blonde, sells jeans. Is she wearing jeans? Probably. But she can very well sell men jeans. Also, think what is the point of the girls in these ads, in their old ads doing this? Uh-huh. And she's advertising what? Cars or tires? They're definitely advertising tires. There's no car. Tires or car? Probably Mercedes. The legs are there. And this is our end of classical conditioning. We're going to watch a video in the class. We're going to discuss it, and we need to discuss it after the operant conditioning, because in that movie there is both classical and operant conditioning. Thank you. Get ready for the operant conditioning in the next lesson.